A letter arrived that no one expected. A single mother, mocked by her neighbors for inheriting a crumbling stone house, stood at the edge of a coastal forest while rumors of old curses and failure drifted through town like fog. She faced a lost future, a son watching her hold back tears, and the echo of every time she'd been told she'd never win. But beneath rotting beams and weathered stone, the secrets of a forgotten war and a stranger's impossible loyalty waited in darkness. When poverty left no choices, would you risk everything for the shimmer of hope or walk away to stay safe? Some inheritances aren't about money. They're a test of the kind of person you choose to become. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, sliding under the apartment door with a whisper that would change everything. Natalie Harper was already running late for her shift at the Coastal Diner, her 11-year-old son Tyler still half asleep at the kitchen table, when she saw the official envelope from Rothman and Associates estate attorneys. She almost threw it away, assuming it was another collections notice dressed up in legal language. But something made her tear it open while Tyler poured cereal with the focused concentration of someone trying not to spill milk they couldn't afford to replace. The words didn't make sense at first. Beneficiary, estate of Louisa Hartwell, property transfer. Natalie read it 3 times before the meaning penetrated the fog of exhaustion that had become her default state. Someone named Louisa Hartwell, a distant relative she never heard of, had died and left her a house, a stone house on 12 acres in Seaside Cove, Connecticut. The letter included a photograph, grainy and water-stained, showing a structure that looked more like a pile of rocks than a residence. "Mom, we're going to be late," Tyler said, not looking up from his cereal. Natalie folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. Late meant lost tips. Lost tips meant choosing between electricity or groceries. She could think about mysterious inheritances after her double shift, after the stop-and-go store register work, after the apartment's broken radiator was temporarily fixed with towels stuffed into leaking joints. Right now, she had exactly 11 minutes to get Tyler to the bus stop and herself to the diner before Gerald started his morning rant about punctuality and personal responsibility. The Coastal Diner smelled like burnt coffee and yesterday's grease, a combination Natalie had long stopped noticing. She moved through her shift on autopilot, pouring refills and delivering plates of eggs, while her mind kept returning to that photograph. A stone house, 12 acres, in a coastal town 2 hours north. The attorney's letter mentioned no mortgage, no liens, just property transferred free and clear to her name. It felt like a trap or a mistake or both. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. During her 15-minute break, Natalie called the law office from the diner's back alley, shivering in the March cold without a proper coat. The receptionist connected her to Mr. Rothman himself, whose voice carried the particular weariness of someone who'd explained the same thing too many times already. "Miss Harper, the estate is quite simple. Louisa Hartwell was your maternal grandmother's second cousin. She died at 94 with no closer living relatives. The property has been unoccupied for approximately 28 years. It requires significant work, but it's structurally sound according to the county assessor." Why would she leave it to me? I never even knew she existed. I couldn't say. Perhaps she knew of you. The will is quite specific about the bequest. He paused. I should mention that you have 60 days to accept or decline the inheritance. After that, the property reverts to the state. 60 days. Natalie thanked him and hung up, staring at the phone in her chapped hands. A house? Her own house? The apartment she rented was barely habitable. The landlord a slumlord who ignored every repair request and threatened eviction whenever she was 3 days late with rent. But a house 2 hours away meant leaving her jobs, leaving the fragile support system of neighbors who occasionally watched Tyler when her shifts overlapped, leaving the only area she'd known since childhood. She made the drive that weekend with Tyler, borrowing her coworker Sandra's car and promising to fill the tank. The highway north cut through bare March landscape, trees still skeletal from winter. Tyler sat in the passenger seat with his handheld game, absorbed in digital worlds, while Natalie's mind raced through increasingly desperate calculations. If the house was livable, even barely, she could sell it or rent it. Or move there and start over somewhere nobody knew her as the woman whose husband had died, leaving nothing but gambling debts and a son who asked too many questions about why Daddy wasn't coming back. Seaside Cove emerged from the coastal fog like something from another era, all weathered clapboard and widow's walks, shops that catered to summer tourists and closed tight against winter's assault. The GPS directed them down increasingly narrow roads until pavement gave way to gravel and gravel gave way to dirt. The house appeared suddenly through bare trees, and Natalie's first thought was that the photograph had been generous. It was stone, as promised, but the kind of stone that suggested amateur construction by someone with more determination than skill. 2 stories of irregular blocks held together by mortar that had cracked and fallen away in sections, leaving gaps where wind whistled through. The roof sagged in the middle. Windows were either boarded over or simply empty frames. The surrounding 12 acres were dense with overgrowth, as if the forest had been steadily reclaiming what had briefly been cleared. "This is it?" Tyler's voice carried disappointment so naked it hurt. "This is what someone left you?" "It's ours," Natalie said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Nobody can take it from us." They explored carefully, Natalie testing floorboards before letting Tyler follow. The interior was a time capsule from some uncertain decade. Furniture shrouded in dust-heavy sheets, walls lined with built-in shelves holding jars of preserved food that had long since gone to mold. But underneath the decay and abandonment, Natalie could see evidence of care. Someone had built this house by hand, stone by stone. Someone had lived here with intention. In what had been the kitchen, Tyler discovered a loose floorboard. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a metal box. Natalie's hands shook as she pried it open, expecting nothing, hoping for something. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in elegant cursive on yellowed paper, all addressed to whoever finds this and signed by Louisa Hardwell. The first one began, "If you're reading this, I am long dead, and you are likely confused. Let me explain what you've inherited and why." Natalie read standing in that cold kitchen while Tyler explored upstairs, his footsteps careful on creaking floors. Louisa's letters told an impossible story. During World War II, she had worked as a civilian secretary for a secret government program called Operation Heartstone. The program had moved strategic gold reserves to hidden locations throughout the Northeast, preparing for possible Nazi invasion. Louisa had been one of 7 people with full knowledge of vault locations. When the war ended, the government tried to recover the gold, but Louisa had refused to reveal one location: the vault beneath this house. The letters became increasingly desperate in tone as years progressed. Louisa wrote about being declared unstable in 1963, about involuntary commitment to a psychiatric facility, about Treasury agents who visited her for years trying to extract information she wouldn't give. She'd escaped the facility in 1974 and spent the rest of her life here, alone, guarding a secret she believed was meant for someone worthy of its burden. "The gold is still there," one letter read, "beneath the cellar floor, behind the false wall I built myself. 16 tons of it. But taking it requires more than greed. It requires understanding what you're meant to do with wealth built on the bones of war. Choose wisely, choose honorably. That's all I ask." Natalie's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. 16 tons of gold. She did the math in her head using numbers she barely understood. Millions, tens of millions, maybe more, hidden beneath the stone floor of a house that now belonged to her. Tyler's voice carried from upstairs, "Mom, there's more letters up here, in the bedroom." Natalie climbed the narrow stairs, each step announcing her presence with groans of protest. Tyler stood in what had been the main bedroom, holding a wooden box filled with additional correspondence. But these weren't from Louisa. They were government documents, yellowed with age and stamped with classification marks that had long since expired. Operation Heartstone transfer records, maps with coordinates, manifests listing gold bars by serial number and weight. She spent 3 hours in that cold house reading by the light of her phone, learning about a secret that had consumed Louisa's entire life. The vault was real, the gold was real, and if these documents were accurate, it was worth approximately $234 million at current market prices, maybe more if the historical significance added value. Natalie's first thought should have been celebration. Instead, she felt terrified. People killed for far less than this, and Louisa's letters made clear that powerful people had spent decades trying to find this location, trying to extract the information, trying to claim what they believed belonged to the government, not to an old woman who'd spent half a century guarding it in isolation. Before we continue, I want you to pause for just a moment. If you found yourself in Natalie's position, inheriting something that could change your life but also endanger it, what would you do? Would you walk away, or would you risk everything to claim what was rightfully yours? Drop your answer in the comments below and hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to take some turns you won't expect. Now, back to Natalie's impossible decision. She should have called the authorities immediately. That was the legal choice, the safe choice. But Natalie thought about Tyler's worn-out shoes, about the apartment's broken heater, about the collections calls that came every evening. She thought about working 2 jobs and still choosing between groceries and electricity. And she thought about Louisa, alone for decades, protecting something she believed was meant for someone who would use it right. Natalie made a decision that terrified her even as she committed to it. She would document everything. She would verify the vault's existence, and only then would she decide what to do. But she needed help, and help meant trusting someone. The next week, she contacted an old friend from high school who'd become a structural engineer. Marcus Reeves had helped her once before, years ago, with no judgment and no questions asked. When she called him, his voice carried the same quiet competence she remembered. "Nat, Jesus, I haven't heard from you in 5 years? I need your expertise and your discretion." They met at the stone house the following Saturday. Marcus walked the property with the methodical attention of someone who made his living identifying structural problems before they became disasters. When Natalie showed him the letters and the documents, he was quiet for a long time. "This is either the biggest discovery in modern history, or you've inherited an old woman's delusion," he said finally. "Either way, we need to check the cellar." The cellar, accessed through a trapdoor in the kitchen floor, hidden beneath a rug that had rotted into the floorboards. Marcus had to work the door loose with a pry bar, the hinges screaming protest after decades of disuse. The smell that rose from below was thick with earth and damp, but underneath it, Natalie thought she detected something else: metal, oil, the particular scent of things built to last being tested by time. They descended with flashlights, feet finding stone steps that had been cut directly from bedrock. The cellar was larger than the house above, extending in directions that made no architectural sense. And at the far wall, behind stacks of rotted wooden crates, they found what Louisa had described: a false wall, built of stone that matched the foundation but set 6 inches back from the true structure. Marcus examined it with hands that had evaluated thousands of buildings. This is deliberate, professional. Someone knew what they were doing. It took them an hour to find the trigger mechanism, a particular stone that depressed when pressed in the right sequence with 3 others. The false wall swung inward on hinges that moved with surprising smoothness despite decades of neglect. And beyond it, set into solid bedrock, was a vault door. Solid steel, government issue, stamped with serial numbers that matched Louisa's documents exactly. Natalie's heart hammered so hard she thought she might pass out. "Can we open it?" Marcus examined the locking wheel, the hinges, the seals. "It's designed to open from the outside. No combination needed, just physical force to turn the wheel. But this hasn't been moved in 70 years? The mechanism might be seized." They worked at it together, applying penetrating oil, heating the metal carefully with a propane torch, taking breaks when the effort became overwhelming. It took most of the day. Tyler brought them sandwiches and water, watching with the kind of intense focus that made him look older than his 11 years. And finally, as afternoon light slanted through the cellar's small windows, the wheel turned. The vault door swung open with a groan that sounded almost human. Natalie's flashlight beam cut into darkness that had been sealed since before she was born. The space beyond was roughly 12 feet square, carved directly from bedrock, and filling it, stacked floor to ceiling in precise rows, were gold bars. They glittered dully in the flashlight beam, each one stamped with eagles and dates from the early 1940s. Natalie counted them twice, her hands shaking. 147 bars, each weighing approximately 28 pounds. All of them authentic if the stamps and serial numbers matching Louisa's documents meant anything. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Holy God! Natalie couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was seeing. This wasn't just money. This was history, legacy, responsibility, and danger. Because if Louisa's letters were true, powerful people had spent decades searching for this location, and now Natalie had found it. They sealed the vault that evening, reset the false wall, and sat in the cold kitchen while Tyler slept upstairs. Marcus broke the silence first. "You have to report this to the federal government, to Treasury. This isn't something you can just keep. Louisa kept it for 60 years and spent half of those years in a psychiatric facility because people thought she was crazy for claiming it existed." Marcus met her eyes. "Nat, this is bigger than us. You can't handle this alone." But Natalie was thinking about Louisa's final letter, the one that had said, "Choose wisely, choose honorably." She was thinking about Tyler's future, about the kind of life this could give him. And she was thinking about people who would try to take it, legally or otherwise, because that's what powerful people did when something valuable was at stake. Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie did something that probably should have terrified her more than it did. She researched. She contacted historians who specialized in World War II financial operations. She found legal scholars who'd written about treasure trove law and government asset recovery. And she learned something crucial. If she could prove Louisa had legal authority to secure the gold and that the government had abandoned claims to it after 70 years, she might have a legitimate ownership argument. But proving that required documents she didn't have, evidence of Louisa's original authority, records showing government abandonment, the kind of paper trail that might not exist anymore or might be classified indefinitely. The break came from an unexpected source. One of the historians Natalie had contacted, a professor named Dr. Sarah Chin, who specialized in wartime financial policy, responded to her inquiry with interest that bordered on obsession. They met at a coffee shop in New Haven, where Dr. Chin spread photocopies of declassified documents across a corner table. Operation Heartstone was real, she said without preamble. Established 1942, dissolved 1947. 7 civilian custodians were given full authority to secure strategic reserves at hidden locations. But here's what's interesting. The program's dissolution didn't include recovery protocols. The gold was just left in place. Treasury assumed the custodians would report the locations voluntarily after the war. But Louisa didn't. No. And according to these documents, Treasury conducted interviews with all 7 custodians in 1948. 6 revealed their locations. The 7th, a woman named Louisa Hartwell, refused. claimed her authority came directly from the program's charter, which gave custodians final discretion over disposition of the reserves. Natalie leaned forward. Does that mean she had legal right to keep it? Dr. Chen hesitated. It means she had an argument. Whether that argument would hold up in modern court is debatable. But here's what you need to understand. If you try to claim this publicly, you'll be fighting the federal government's assertion that all World War II strategic reserves revert to Treasury ownership. They have unlimited legal resources. You have, what? Whatever you can afford on a diner waitress's salary? So I should just turn it over? I didn't say that. Dr. Chen's expression was unreadable. I'm saying you need leverage, documentation, proof that Louisa's authority was legitimate and that the government abandoned their claim decades ago. Without that, this becomes a legal battle you can't win. Natalie spent the next month building her case with the kind of obsessive focus she'd once applied to keeping Tyler fed and clothed on poverty wages. She found Louisa's original authorization letter, signed by officials whose names appeared in Dr. Chen's declassified documents. She located Treasury Department correspondence from the 1960s explicitly stating they considered the matter closed after Louisa's psychiatric commitment. She even found the court order from 1974 declaring Louisa legally competent again, which the government had never appealed. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. She needed someone with enough legal authority to present her case without it being dismissed immediately. That's when Marcus suggested his former college roommate, now a lawyer who'd built a reputation taking on government overreach cases. Jonathan Park listened to her story with the stone-faced neutrality of someone who'd heard every impossible tale imaginable. Then he asked to see the gold. They made the trip together on a cold April afternoon, Jonathan Park bringing equipment to test the gold's authenticity. When the vault door opened and his portable spectrometer confirmed what Natalie already knew, that these were genuine government-issue gold bars from the 1940s, his professional facade cracked. This is real. This is actually real. Can I keep it? Jonathan was quiet for a long time. That depends on whether you're willing to go public immediately before anyone else learns this exists and tries to seize it under national security provisions. Going public means what? Means we contact the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN simultaneously. We present your evidence of Louisa's authority and the government's abandonment. We force them to acknowledge this publicly before they can classify it into oblivion. It's risky, but it's the only way you might actually win. Natalie thought about Tyler, about keeping him safe, about Louisa, who'd spent decades in hiding to protect this secret, and she made a choice that terrified her. Let's do it. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in May. Hidden World War II gold vault discovered in Connecticut, single mother claims historic find, appeared simultaneously in all three outlets. Within hours, Natalie's phone was ringing constantly. News crews appeared at the Stone House. Federal agents from Treasury, Homeland Security, and God knew what other agencies showed up demanding access. Jonathan had anticipated this. He'd filed a restraining order the night before publication, preventing government seizure pending a hearing on ownership rights. It held for exactly 18 hours before a federal judge in New York overturned it, citing national security concerns. Agents arrived at the Stone House with a warrant. Natalie watched from the driveway as they descended into the cellar, documented the vault, and began the process of removing the gold bars one by one. Tyler stood beside her watching. They're taking it? They're just taking it? For now, Natalie said, though her heart was breaking. We're not done fighting. The legal battle stretched across the summer. Jonathan argued that Louisa's original authorization remained valid, that the government had explicitly abandoned claims in the 1960s, and that Natalie was the rightful inheritor of both the property and its contents. Federal prosecutors argued that all strategic wartime reserves remained government property regardless of custodial arrangements, that Louisa's refusal to reveal the location constituted theft, and that Natalie had no legitimate claim to stolen assets. The case became national news. Public opinion split sharply. Some people saw Natalie as a modern David fighting government Goliath. Others saw her as a greedy opportunist trying to profit from what rightly belonged to taxpayers. The comments on news articles ranged from supportive to vicious, dissecting her life, her late husband's debts, her fitness as a mother. Through it all, Natalie kept working at the diner, kept getting Tyler to school, kept living in the same cramped apartment because she couldn't afford anything else while the gold sat in a government facility in Maryland. She gave one interview to a sympathetic journalist, explaining that she wasn't fighting for greed, but for Tyler's future, for the security Louisa had wanted for whoever inherited this burden. The verdict came in October, delivered by a federal judge who'd spent 3 months reviewing evidence. Natalie sat in the courtroom with Jonathan and Tyler, her hands gripping the armrests hard enough to leave marks. The judge read his decision in a voice that carried no emotion whatsoever. The gold had been secured under valid wartime authority. The government had explicitly abandoned recovery efforts in 1967, documented in Treasury correspondence. Louisa Hartwell's will clearly bequeathed the property and all contents to Natalie Harper. Therefore, ownership rights transferred legally upon Louisa's death. However, and Natalie's heart sank at that word, the historical and strategic value of the find required government partnership. The judge ordered a settlement. Natalie would receive 50% of the gold's value, approximately $117 million after taxes. The remaining 50% would go to the National Archives to fund preservation of World War II historical records. The gold itself would be transferred to Fort Knox, with select bars displayed in various museums telling Operation Heartstone story. It wasn't everything, but it was more than Natalie had dared hope when she'd found those letters in Louisa's cold kitchen. She walked out of that courtroom knowing Tyler's future was secure, knowing they could leave the cramped apartment and the crushing poverty behind. The first thing she did with the money was establish the Louisa Hartwell Foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers escaping financial instability. The second thing was buying the stone house and the surrounding 12 acres, which she transformed into a museum telling Louisa's story. The displays included the original letters, the government documents, photographs of Louisa at various ages, and a replica of the vault door. Visitors could walk through and see where one woman had guarded a secret for 60 years at tremendous personal cost because she believed it meant something. Tyler helped design the exhibits. At 12 years old, he understood in ways other kids didn't what it meant to have nothing and then to have security. He understood what his great-great-cousin Louisa had protected and why it mattered. On the museum's opening day, Natalie stood in the stone house's restored kitchen and read one of Louisa's letters aloud to the gathered crowd. The one that ended, "Wealth means nothing if you don't know what to do with it. Use it to build something that lasts. Use it to help people who need help. That's what makes treasure valuable, not the gold itself, but what you choose to do when you find it." The room was silent when she finished. Then Tyler started clapping, and others joined until the sound filled the space. Natalie thought about the morning that certified letter had arrived, how close she'd come to throwing it away, how different her life and Tyler's would be if she had. Sometimes people asked if she resented giving up half the gold. She never knew how to explain that keeping it all would have felt like betraying Louisa's trust. The old woman had spent 60 years protecting something she believed was meant for someone honorable. Natalie had tried to be worthy of that faith. 2 years later, standing in that same kitchen during the museum's anniversary celebration, Natalie received a package. No return address, just her name in careful handwriting. Inside was a single photograph, water-damaged and faded. It showed a young woman in 1940s dress standing in front of the stone house, her expression serious but not unkind. On the back, in that same handwriting, "Thank you for being what I hoped you would be, L.H." The photograph had been mailed from nowhere, postmarked from a distribution center that handled thousands of packages daily. But Natalie knew somehow that it was real, that Louisa had left one final message for whoever would find her secret and choose wisely with it. She framed the photograph and hung it in the museum's entrance. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Louisa Hartwell, 1918-2012, guardian, custodian, believer in the power of trust placed in worthy hands." And every day, Natalie walked past that photograph and remembered the choice she'd made in a cold kitchen with Tyler's future hanging in the balance. Not to take the gold, but to honor the woman who'd protected it. That, she'd learned, was the real inheritance Louisa had left her. The wealth was real, but the lesson was priceless. Before we go, I want you to know something important. Natalie's story isn't just about finding gold. It's about what you do when life gives you an impossible choice. When doing the right thing costs you everything you want. If you're watching this and you've faced moments like that, moments where the easy path was wrong and the right path was terrifying, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me about a time you chose the hard right over the easy wrong. These stories matter. Your story matters because the real treasure isn't what we find. It's who we become when we decide what to do with it. Hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money. It's the chance to prove you're worthy of someone else's faith in you. We'll see you in the next one.